Hello, hello, hello. How are you? Welcome to a super special bonus episode of the Hilaritas Podcast with me, your host, Mike Gathers. Hilaritas Press has released a new edition of one of Robert Anton Wilson's last books, TSOG, The Thing That Ate the Constitution, with a new foreword by Bobby Campbell, an afterword by Steve Fly Pratt, and a lengthy essay by Michael Johnson on Wilson, Vico, language, and class warfare. In this bonus episode, I chat with Bobby Campbell on TSOG and RAW politics, including our discussion of a supplemental interview with RAW on TSOG that's available on YouTube. You'll find a link to that in the show notes. Bobby and I start our chat with a discussion on RAW's political stance, which you can find in one of the first chapters of TSOG the book.
He published that on his website, like the original Zog conspiracy theory thing. And there's not any more in the book about it. It's the book is another one of those compilation style books.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be more in detail about it, but it almost feels like how Cosmic Trigger 3 was just let's take everything I've written over the past 2 years and put it in a book. And that's he carries the thread throughout it, but it's not really a coherent statement about a specific topic. More is just this is where I'm at this time, which is probably even better because it's such a scattershot of ideas and stuff. So it doesn't, and which is probably if he's going to write a political book, which I guess he's saying this is his first political book in that interview, it would make sense that it's more scattershot than a clear delineation of an ideology, because that's how his political thinking was. It was momentary, circumstantial, and pretty malleable to what was going on in his life and in the world. It's an interesting snapshot on him. You definitely get a different version of him there than you kind of do anywhere else, I feel like.
Oh, interesting.
Well, maybe I would say maybe Cosmic Trigger 3 and this you would put that you can tell the same guy wrote those two books, but I don't know that you would say the same guy wrote any of the other books, because how he talks about how he has these the different versions of himself through time, and those two books seem to be a pretty similar snapshot of him.
Say more about that.
I what I think it is? I think it's the post-Arlen version of him. I if I had to guess what the difference is, I think it's that. And it's also, but weirdly enough, different than the version of him from the Maybe Logic classes. The Maybe Logic version of him was more old Taoist sage guy, and that's my favorite version of him. The version of him on those classes where he's responding in fortune cookie style fragments. Right. I love that. Oh man, I would have read they should at some point collect everything he wrote for those classes and put it in a book, because it's almost like Sigismundo's journal from Nature's God, where you just go through and it's boom, 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 and it's so condensed. Everything he's saying, instead of saying it over 10 pages, he's saying it in 3 lines. Whereas I would say in Zog and in Cosmic Trigger 3, it's kind of the reverse. He's taking one thought and expanding it across several pages. Whereas then when he gets a little bit older and maybe not quite so willing to sit at the keyboard so long, I think he's doing more thinking and less writing. Whereas I would say with this, he's thinking out loud as he writes.
Nice. I love the way you put that. I used to, I have from the classes I took, for the most part, I would save all his comments. And in fact, I just posted the ones from Tale of the Tribe for the other thing we're trying to put together, which we should talk about that maybe before we go too much further.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I would send those comments to Michael Johnson, just saying, here's what's going on in the Maybe Logic classes. I don't know if you can parse what's going on because it's just Wilson's comments, but here they are. And he would be like, you don't really need
You
the
don't.
background to appreciate what he's writing there. And I would go
It's
back and
almost,
look.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
it's almost better without it. It's almost better without the context in a weird way, because
Well,
it comes across like Dao De Ching chapters.
right. It's just like you said, little, and that's kind of to me like little ideograms, what he's trying to say and do there with this kind of multi-dimensional hologramic dynamic use of language.
Even like in those classes, like his abbreviations for things become like these really like precise articulations of like how we say every word is a fossilized poem. The fact that you can
Mm,
condense some of these words down to 2 letters instead of 5, and he's just trying to get it down into as small a piece of information as he can. I think that that stuff is like a diamond waiting to be carved out, I think.
right. I like that diamond perspective too, because it's like depending on how you look at it, it's got that multifaceted. I'm glad we talked about this. That's
Yeah.
um brings me fond reminiscence of the Maybe Logic Academy. I think, and it seems like a lot of his later books were like this, or maybe kind of sparse throughout, where there was like really more just compilations of essays put together thematically.
I assume that's what email. I haven't read Email to the Universe. I assume that's what that
Yeah,
is as well, right? And I
it
guess coincidence is that too, but it's more thematically connected, I think.
it is, and I'm not sure where some of that material might have come from. Like natural law, not natural law. I get these confused.
New
Not
Inquisition.
New Inquisition is a lot of material that was published in New Libertarian magazine. And I think a lot of SOG was published in High Times in the early 90s.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that makes sense.
And I will toot my own horn because I believe that Email to the Universe was largely taken from that Raw Fans website. I was
Oh yeah,
uh,
I remember that. That was it was like you and Eric Wagner like grabbing everything that was scattered across the internet, and once you put it all in one place, they realized there was a book there, right?
yeah, well, I just back on Usenet, altfan.ra Wilson. Mike Johnson actually started that group back in like 97, 98. And that's about when I discovered Raw and I found that. And there was a German guy that created, he called it a fuck-a-fac. How did that go? Frequently answered and frequently unanswered questions. And then from there, Mike Johnson wrote a little bio, and then we started linking in whatever we could find on the internet, and it was interviews and essays. And he would just post it on Usenet every so often, like an update. And I was like,
Okay,
man,
yeah.
I thought, man, this really needs a website. So, and then I found I had a Comcast account, which basically had like a cheesy little hosting opportunity. And I just basically took what he created and made it into pages. And I would literally take Word documents and then save them as HTML pages and upload them.
Oh, that's yeah. I used to do the same thing. Like I
Yeah,
kind of miss that version of the internet. I'm actually like heading back that way for my own purposes. Like just like hacking together HTML pages is so much more
right,
satisfying than a social media post. And like yeah, I think that's the direction I'd like the future to go. So
right. Go
that's the way I'm going to go. Whether anyone else follows or is also out there, I don't know. But
retro internet. I mean, I would
mhm.
literally, there was a home page, so it was sort of a menu, but there was no navigation. You had to hit the back arrow to get however you did it, because I just was doing Word documents. But once I searched the internet for everything I found, I started combing eBay. and just whatever these obscure magazines are. And then people would send me stuff, and Wagner had a bunch of stuff, and Mike Johnson had a bunch of stuff. And a few of those old guys like Brian Shields would help convert it from text to digital. Just sometimes that we'd type it, sometimes we'd try to scan it and convert it, but that was pretty primitive back then. And I would often post a new article, and then within a couple days it would get sent around on his Usenet list, his little email list. So he knew what was going on, and about half of those articles in Email the Universe were unique to my website, and the other half were just kind of stuff, but it was all stuff that was just out on the internet, linked into the website. And then he had these haikus he sprinkled throughout it. So yeah, that's my ego story, is I like to think my website led to that book.
I remember the old version of that website where you had all the book covers, and I remember it just like pouring over that. I love that stuff, I dreamed of having my artwork on there one day, and the fact that it actually happened, like I legitimately was like, oh, if only I could get there.
How funny! And then you did.
Yeah, and then I did.
I still have those pages linked in, or at least 2 or 3 of them. I think I might have lost one, and but I have not been updating it, and the software I used to create that, who knows where that went. But now I'm motivated to update it, so we'll have your art on there too. That's awesome. I remember you emailing me telling me you had like to look through all that, and there was some.
Yeah, I love how weird some of his book covers were. There is some wild stuff out there. I love the like current style even more, but there's something about that, like the independent bookshop freaky looking books that you would just come across and like, what the hell is this? And or there's something kind of fun about that.
Yeah, and some of like the what were those medieval Illuminati?
Oh yeah, the
historical chronicles.
Yeah. So the painted covers on those are great.
They went through like a lot of different publishers, and so there was just a lot of different covers for that series, and those were really neat. I thought all of them are kind of cool.
Yeah, it was back when like book covers were like more of an art form where you would have someone do a full painting for a book cover, which it feels a little bit rare now. Now it's more of a graphic design thing, right, and less of a like artwork kind of thing.
I hadn't thought of this, but I've been on Twitter more and more with the podcast and everything, especially, and ran into it's like 70s science fiction book covers.
Oh yeah.
So it just like you said, it's this elaborate art, a lot of fantasy stuff, and just really amazing stuff comes across my.
I think you can tell there was more money in the stuff back then, like more money in book publishing, because then you could pay a cover artist to produce something that would take them a month to do. You could, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like the
right.
money the cover artist would make would cover him for a while, so you could actually go in and do something elaborate. Whereas now it's just like go. And not for everything, but in a lot of cases.
Well, maybe let's just switch gears a little and see how we can ease into this.
Sure.
I don't know that even if I played it right now, it would work, but I wanted to play that first bit of TSOG where he does like the Call of Cthulhu.
Oh yeah, I always loved that. That really captured my imagination when I first heard it, and I think like so when I listen to the interview, when you hear that, I think it's more clear, and the only place where it's clear, that he's probably trying to satirize the Zionist conspiracy theory. I think that's the part where he's directly addressing those people and being like, that thing you think is dumb, this thing I'm going to tell you about is real. I think you should consider this instead. Like, I think that's where he's like, you think it only does harm to Black people and immigrants, and that, you know what I mean? Like but its hand is at your own throat. So like, I think he's like, because even in that interview, he really does lean into the like white people have fucked up the world and we shouldn't be surprised that we're being criticized for it. Like, and so I think he
Yeah.
has this this thought process going on, but I don't think he quite knows how to broach the subject directly. So instead of broaching it directly, I think he wanted to go this route because and you know, as I read through Zog, he doesn't at all mention that he's making a pun. Like he
Right.
never says like I'm satirizing this, or he doesn't even, you know, let you know that I didn't know that it was a pun until someone brought it up and said, "Hey, not a great idea for a title." And I was like, "Oh, wait, what?" You know, it was blissfully unaware that that was a prominent thing. Like I knew the protocols of the elders of Zion and all that sort of stuff, but I didn't know uh, what the overarching term was.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, God.
No, I agree that I didn't quite get that this is something that might be considered taboo. Um, and I wonder how much of that, so we're kind of referring to that Twitter thread, which I think was 2019. So it's a few years old, but where they're kind of criticizing his taste for titling it Zog and how that refers to Zog, ZOG, and the Zionist conspiracies. And I wonder, you know, that's always been a thing, but I don't know that it was, I wonder if it would have been that offensive 20 years ago as it might be perceived today.
Sure, yeah. And yeah, I mean, well, because I think like at least this shows at least my own naivety is that I think at the time it felt like organized hate movements were on the way out. It felt like that it wasn't going to persist with such a high profile. But you
Right.
know, like if you asked me in 2004, like especially like back then, like hate groups were cartoon supervillains that were used as punching bags for, you know, superheroes and the Blues Brothers to, you know, drive by and splash with puddles. You know, like it wasn't this thing that felt like an act of concern, but that's also because they don't actively target me. So it would make sense that it wouldn't necessarily be on my radar without it being forced onto my radar. And so maybe that's like part of it is like I didn't know what ZOG was because I really didn't have to know. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it wasn't something that was going to come out
Exactly.
and push me. So it's sort of like, you know, our nervous system is attuned to threats. And if that isn't something that I know as a threat, I'm not going to pick up on it.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I had a friend a close friend that was Jewish that he drove by his synagogue and there was somebody that looking suspicious and he called it in and this and that. And I was really surprised at the reaction. And there was just this undercurrent of, no, this is still very much a thing. And I think it always has been for Jewish folks, but that the rest of us might not have been as aware of it back then. But the undercurrent of this book seemed to be really this post 9/11 us versus the terrorists kind of thing. That's where the hate
Right.
was directed, is at the Middle Eastern terrorist types, not other groups.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So it did feel like that was the main premise that you were pushing back against was Islamophobia. That was the one that was like full on active, that was to be contended with. And I think that maybe made everything else less obvious because that was so obvious. Yeah. Again, sometimes it's tough to tell like what's in the culture and what's just like your personal experience of it.
What comes up for me though is this kind of opens the door to talk a little about a critical eye of Wilson, or you know, the Twitter thread really opened up a lot of critiques on Raw, most of which I don't know that I can jive with, although some of them I could. There was this a lot of emphasis on how he had a Randian phase and an Ayn Rand phase, and then was in his writing offering catering to the far right and the Randian crowd. And I don't get that at all, to be honest.
Well, I don't know about the Randian thing, because I always like I didn't know what objectivism or who Ayn Rand was uh, before reading his take on them, and I got a very negative impression of them through him. So if he was supporting them, I missed the point of that, because I got like what I got from that is those people are bad news. That's the impression I got. I remember during the maybe logic classes, like I really, really, really did not want George W. Bush to win that re-election. I thought it was like the fact that he got in on a scam and then turned out to be a
Right.
bad president and started a war. I was like, all right, our bad. We let him in on accident. But then I thought after the war, if we reelected him, if we were like, no, all good with us, keep on going, I thought that would be a really, really bad look. And so I really, really did not want George W. Bush to win. And I ate a lot of shit for that in the maybe logic classes from the both sides kind of perspective. And Rawl played the both sides card on that because he had been burned by Clinton. I think Clinton burned him, and so he wasn't really willing to hop off the fence because he'd just been burned. But then when I went to meet him, he was like, "Boy, I sure do hope John Kerry wins because he supports stem cell research." I was like, "Dude, what the fuck? Like, you can't say that in real life. Like, come on, man. Like, if that's what you think, say what you think. Don't hide what you think because people are going to get mad at you. Say what you think." And so I now I'm not really second guessing him, but that was my response in the moment, was like, come on, dude, you watch me eat shit for 2 months and you agree with me?
But that's an interest. I think that brings up this like public versus private persona. And
yeah, for sure. And I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
His shtick, was to encourage you to think about, what the excluded middle or whatever we want to call it.
Right.
And so because I think I was talking with Michael Johnson about this long ago, and I was just talking about his over enthusiasm for the optimistic futurism and, all these wild ideas about life extension and space exploration and technology going to change the world. And it's like, well, this was coming out of the Cold War. I think we were trying to promote a positive, optimistic mindset when a lot of people were in a negative space. And so it's not necessarily that he maybe believed in that stuff wholeheartedly, but he's trying to promote optimism.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that to some extent, Robert Anton Wilson was a character played by Bob Wilson in some cases.
Say more about that. I love that.
Well, so I think that Robert Anton Wilson was like a icon that he created that, like you say, was meant to sit in the excluded middle and pull from both sides. You ever seen that Subgenius cartoon where where Bob Dobbs is pulling people both from the right and left towards it? So basically you have a leftist person screaming stuff and a right wing person screaming stuff, and he's like trying to pull them together. And I think he kind of and he positions himself that way in several different cases where he's like, the left is right about big business, the right is right about government. And so I think he definitely wanted to be this like non-Euclidean figure that would pull in people from both sides. And I think that's literally what the Guns and Dope Party is. I think that's like literally him trying to create a shared common ground that both sides could agree on. Though oddly was the first. So, I originally, when I was younger, probably was too uncritical in my reading of Robert Anton Wilson. I probably depended on him too much for what to think about the world and, you know, the various things that were going on in it. And it was really, so I remember I was updating my website and I put up a guns and dope party thing, went to bed and woke up to the Virginia Tech shooting massacre.
Ooh.
And the direct, like, this is the last thing I saw, this was the first thing I saw. And I was like, wait, do I actually think that? Like, do I actually agree with that position and that framing? And I was like, wait, no, I think I don't. And not to say that it's wrong. Like, and again, as previously established, I think he was strategically doing it to try to create division or create unity where there was division. But I had to like really go, wait, no, I actually don't think that. Like I live in New Jersey right now. We have pretty good gun laws and legal weed, so you can kind of have your cake and eat it too if you want. So do I actually think that? No, I don't think I do. And then that created this whole like new area of usefulness for his work, because now I started to be like, oh wait, no, do I think that? And then it actually produced the result that he wanted, which is to get me thinking for myself by questioning him. And so it created just the result he was looking for by disagreeing with him, which I thought was interesting. That I was like, no, I actually don't agree with him, and therefore I agree with him because that's what he wants.
Right. You're thinking on your own now. I
Right?
think
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so and that's why I reacted negatively to when people seem to shut down on the criticism of him without it seemingly to take it seriously, because I was like, no, this is an opportunity to parse some things out and not just say, you know, he's right because he admits that he could be wrong. You got to dig into that a little bit further, because that attitude, the Robert Anton Wilson saying I might be wrong, don't believe me, actually made me believe him more when I was younger, and actually was a shield against criticism that I didn't really penetrate until coincidence kind of forced me to. So and again, like, the guns and dope party may turn out to be a brilliant unifying idea that is beyond my comprehension. But I also just have to be honest, like, do I actually want to wear that as a shirt? No, I don't. So I don't know. It's actually interesting to take him seriously when he suggests not to believe him, because you might uncover some unconsidered perspectives.
I like that a lot. Certainly the guns and dope thing, I think, was one of his most controversial things. And I think a lot of his friends were like, what the hell are you doing here with this? So it's interesting that that's kind of what shocked you awake on maybe the fallibility of Robert Anton Wilson.
Yeah, and I don't. Again, it's less a critique of the idea, just my unquestioning support for it. That was the thing where I was like, oh wait, I'm messing up here. Like I did not actually think this through before I threw my support behind it. I just re-listened to Cosmic Trigger, and I was like, man, this is such a good story, but like, 40 years after the fact, it a lot of the things that are presented, like especially with the alien stuff, just didn't really. It feels like it wouldn't play now. If that book came out now, I don't know that it would hit the same audience.
Right.
But it was also, but that's why it came out then and not now. Like, it makes sense that that's what the world was like. That's what people were talking about, and that's how they evaluated things. So I don't want to. I can't fault them for it at all. But it just hits me different is all.
Well, it makes you wonder if that's the way he experienced that whole bizarre event, because that's the way the culture was experiencing bizarre events like that. And if he had that in 2022, would it be a completely different zeitgeist, so to speak, or paradigm?
Yeah. That's like, because I had my own weird experiences, but when I had them, I was like, oh, this is my brain doing this. Like, I was like, when I saw aliens, I was like, interesting. My nervous system is creating the impression of an alien. I wasn't like a visitor from beyond. It was because all that groundwork had already been
Right.
done previously. The ground had shifted underneath our feet, and so I was living in a different zeitgeist than he was. And I just wrote this whole thing that was about like how common it was in the 70s for people to believe they had extraterrestrial visitations, and for people to take them seriously. Like, the whole Heaven's Gate cult, weirdly enough, like in that context, isn't so strange. Like, it's crazy that it survived to the 90s, but when it's sitting amongst like, Timothy Leary saying the same thing, and John Lilly saying the same thing, and Terrence McKenna is saying the same thing. And it's like you have all these like very successful people broadcasting these outlandish messages. It all of a sudden doesn't become outlandish.
Right.
Because outlandish means no one agrees with you. If you have,
Right.
very stable signals broadcasting something, then it's no longer impossible.
Right. It kind of normalizes the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. And if you were in a more Christian religious belief system, you might interpret those to be angels, and that's that. And here we are.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess that's why you get the simulation thing now, because that's the new metaphor. The new metaphor is more like a matrixy kind of thing, because we live in a like our environment is now technology, and so now when you have a transcendental experience, it now takes on that flavor. So it's instead of being visited by aliens or angels or whatever, now you're seeing through to a like code basis of reality, because that's the current dominant metaphor.
I like that one, because I like this. We always talk about this metaphor of waking up. And that's where I feel like just that robotic habitual self is the living in the matrix. And that process of waking up is stepping out of the matrix into the real world, so to speak.
Yeah, that's why that movie worked, because there was a part of it that was true. It's just the metaphor wasn't literal, but we live in a matrix of an exchange between our interpretations and an unknowable reality.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the real Gnostic influence behind the Matrix, is that.
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. Well, let's see if we move a little past our thing. It's the audio goes from again, we have that like Call of Cthulhu Lovecraftian introduction that puts some levity on the whole thing. And then he's even got that, I want to say it's like a Mo Horowitz quote, or what, are you stupid or something?
Oh, yeah.
Really emphasizing, hey, this is a parody, folks. We're not, you had a good point earlier. I think when you listen to that, you realize like this is not something to be taken too seriously.
Yeah, for sure.
And then it moves right into a maybe logic pitch, I guess you could say, description of maybe logic. And I find that interesting. He really just goes right into this kind of non-dual reality as a way to talk about what essentially is a political essay, I guess. And so it makes you immediately think we're going to have to step out of the whole left-right binary thinking.
Yeah, for sure. It's I think the maybe logic thing has really turned out to be a pretty fortunate thing to have learned, when I learned it, because like as consensus reality is kind of splintered in a lot of ways, I think the maybe state of mind has served me pretty well, especially in like interpersonal relationships. Like it's very easy to get along with people when you're in the maybe state. Like like at work, people be fighting about stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever you're saying seems like it could be right. Whatever they're saying seems like it could be right. And, like I find that with that attitude, I do not get brought into fights that I don't need to be in. And
Nice.
I will. Now he doesn't stress it in either the book or the interview. But E prime, when paired with maybe logic, is really, really useful. Whenever I'm going to disagree with someone on the internet, I write an E prime, and it never escalates. Never escalates.
Well said.
It just doesn't. It is so useful. It prevents you from overstating your case, stepping over the line. It is so useful. And in fact, I think he probably should have written this book in EPRIME.
Ooh.
I think that might have helped a little bit. Not that, I mean, it's fine just the way it is, but I think if he was going to wade into politics, I think if he wrote an E-prime like he did quantum psychology, it would have been, it would be interesting to see how that would turn out, because he is 100% right when he says that helps with
Yeah.
disagreement, because it really, really does. Even for yourself, maybe more for yourself. Because like sometimes you'll start like mad, and as soon by the time I finish writing out what I have to say in E prime, I'm not mad anymore. I feel like I've communicated my point of view, and I've also calmed myself down, because I've
Nice.
taken out all of those, like the hot buttons have all kind of been neutralized. And but I'm but it also, because the downside of maybe logic is indecisiveness.
Yes.
That's the downside. That's the thing you got to watch out for. And so you're still saying what you got to say, but you're also like taking out the unnecessary venom with it. Like one thing I've noticed in myself, and I'm going to assume this is true of other people as well. I'm going to assume that this is universal, but it could just be me. I am a natural hypocrite. Like, just
That's everybody. That's
yeah,
human.
I assume so. I don't want to assume everyone out there, but I'm going to guess that all of us here are natural hypocrites. I used to live in Philadelphia, and I would ride my bike to the car share thing. There used to be a thing where you would like pay a certain amount per month and you could borrow a car. So I was riding my bike to the car, and the whole time I'm like, these fucking cars, people have, they're just, they don't look, the cars are the problem. And then I would park my bike and I would get in the car and I'd be like, these fucking bicyclists, they don't. And it was just one of those things where I had the thought like within about 3 minutes of each other, and I was like, oh wait, no, it's the system has forced us to coexist when there should be two. There should be a better system that we don't have to just fight each other over the same area. And so so I realized like, oh no, that very strongly held opinion I have certainly changed depending on whether I was in a bike or in a car.
Right. That I spent on the subject of E prime. I 100% agree. I think back when I was really active on that Usenet alt.fam.ra Wilson, I spent a couple years or maybe over a year posting everything in E prime. All my comments were in E prime. And at first, it's amazing how much work you have to put into it to kind of find your way around. And then you start to find a few gimmicks that help you sort it out.
Right.
Seems to me is a great way to replace is, and then that gets kind of repetitive and lame. But I talk about that a lot, as how powerful that was. Like it really changed it was psychedelic in a
For
way.
sure.
And
Yeah.
that I just started to see how truly subjective everything is. And I'm like, I'm not talking about objective truth. I'm talking about my own perspective on what may be an objective truth. And it's since I stopped doing that, the kind of that sense has faded a little bit, but it really, for the most part, is something I carry with me ever since then, about how it's neurological relativity. I think that's kind of one of the things that Wilson talks about from Ulysses, is how that book kind of frames everybody having the same day from a different perspective. And so everybody's got their own neurological relativity. But there is also that pitfall early on in E prime where you start like peppering everything with uncertainties that have nothing to do with E prime, as a matter of fact. It's like you get caught in this loop of, like you said, indecision, or just like, I don't feel like I can speak with certainty on anything. And in fact, what I found is like, no, I can speak on certainty around my experience, but that's about it.
Right. Yeah. 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 And there's that thing because he talks about like there's strong maybes and there's weak maybes, and sometimes
Mm,
that's a hard delineation to make. And because it is a problem when you just kind of give up all agency over your perceptions. But then it's equally a problem if you kind of try to use your perceptions to dominate as well. Um, and then something I've seen a lot of people do is use the like reality tunnel thing as proof that they're right and other people are wrong. And I think that's
mm.
another pitfall. Like they'll point out that oh, the reason you think that is because of your reality tunnel, as if that doesn't also apply to you. And I think that's a tricky thing to watch out for too. Is as he said, like it's easier to see other people's reality tunnels than to see your own.
There's a couple pitfalls I see, and that's a major one. Like I think Wilson was a master of the Third Circuit, really. And I will kind of put belief systems as a term to describe the Third Circuit versus reality tunnels, which maybe describes the sum total of all the circuits. So when you talk about the Third Circuit, I think that there's something inherent in language to where it so permeates everything we do that it's like the trickster. We don't realize how binding it is. And then maybe we wake up a little bit to this trickster of language, and we think, oh, we've got it figured out. But it's like there's an endless depth to explore. It's like shadow. You think you discover a little shadow and oh, I found my shadow, but it's like, no, there's like, that's like the tip of the iceberg. And you kind of have this delusion that you've woken up to everything, and that my reality tunnel is now complete and yours is still not woke.
Right,
And
right.
it just doesn't jive. It's easy to lose that beginner mind skepticism, I think. You wake up a little bit, you gain some awareness, and you think, oh, I've got it figured out. But it's really something you have to just keep applying and applying. And sometimes people feel like they've got it figured out. And does that make sense, what I'm trying to
Oh
say
yeah.
there?
Yeah, for sure. And it reminds me, the trial logs, the thing Terrence McKenna, Rupert Sheldrake, and Ralph Abraham would do. I remember there was one thing where Ralph Abraham warns the audience that the way that Terrence says things makes things more convincing than they should be, and that, and that basically like you know sometimes our own cleverness is our own worst enemy because it's perfectly attuned for tricking ourselves. And like you say, the Third Circuit can be used to construct very persuasive arguments that are only persuasive to you. And so sometimes you got to watch out for your own handiwork in the mix.
Right, we're the master that makes the grass green, and we're very creative about it.
You're
We have
right,
to,
right, and
we have to be
and
aware of our own
we know
cleverness.
all of our own buttons to press.
Right.
So yeah.
Unconsciously. Maybe that's the other trap I wanted to say with maybe, I don't know if it's a trap of maybe logic, but kind of along those same lines, we find these usually folks from the hard right that discover Robert Anton Wilson, maybe through the Illuminati thing, and they don't quite seem to get the whole maybe logic thing. And they kind of cherry pick Robert Anton Wilson writing to justify their own hard right conspiratorial reality tunnel. And I think that was one of the critiques that came up in that Twitter thread, is that there's just a lot of far right people that latch onto some of these ideas, but don't quite get the whole model agnosticism, maybe logic thing. I don't know if you have any thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, I've definitely seen quite a bit of that. Prometheus Rising seems to be the book that they're latching onto.
Hmm.
And I don't know particularly why. Maybe that's like the most like all head no heart of the books. Like Cosmic Trigger has a lot of heart in it. Like you're not going to walk out of Cosmic Trigger without having empathy. And I think that there's that whole thing about opening the head chakra before you open the heart chakra, and I think that there's a little bit of that going on. I think that there's
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, that and because I guess like if you it's probably pretty appealing to get the reality tunnel, upper circuit, the power part of it, because it's very like an empowering to the individual nervous system, and you can take that and run with it in a way where you're not acknowledging how it affects other people. And I think maybe that's part of it. I think that there's like the Nietzschean Superman part of it, and that if you don't pair that with compassion and you know uh, some form of collectivism, that you're going to go all for the head chakra and leave behind the heart. And that's why I think a little bit. I think the eight circuit model. I think circuit 4 is underdeveloped in the current versions of the model. I think that that's where. So Timothy Leary had kind of like the Buddha type of life, where he was like, I got to leave behind Tim Leary, regular person, and go off and be an icon, because that's the only way these ideas are going to get pushed forward. And I think he played that character so much that he maybe became that character. And the fourth
Mm.
circuit would probably be the part where you're making breakfast for your kids and washing the dishes and that sort of stuff that he probably felt that he couldn't actually do. It's the Buddha leaving his family
Mm.
to chase after enlightenment. And I think that so he probably couldn't have mapped out circuits 5, 6, 7, and 8 without jumping from 3 to 5 in some ways. And I think Raw, I think the appeal of Raw is that he is a little bit more down to earth. I think that's why I like Raw, because he's like the only of the 60s psychonauts that seemed like was also a like nice regular person. But like even I've heard Christina say that like Raw was a wonderful person, so dad. And I think that maybe I think that there's a little bit of work to be done in the Fourth Circuit in terms of grounding our cosmic ambitions into something that's also like compatible with everyday life.
Wow. I love that. I'm having to soak all that in. Yeah, I think of this Fourth Circuit as our role in the village, and or many things actually, but that's one
I
phrase
agree
that
with
kind
that,
of a
definitely.
cap. And maybe Tim, I think Tim really enjoyed celebrity.
Hmm.
So he kind of, that celebrity rock star philosopher thing really fit him. And maybe he felt that was his role in the village, but there's also that kind of, like you said, chop wood, carry water part that maybe got left behind.
And I don't know that it wasn't necessary for him. It's not. I'm not saying he should have done anything. Like I think it makes sense that he went the way he went, and yeah, yeah. So it's just I think at a certain point you got to circle back, and because not everyone can do that. Like not everyone can be psychedelic rock stars. I don't think that works.
Right. Well, you hinted at this, but I think there was a great deal of humility in Robert Anton Wilson that brought him down to earth and made him approachable. And that, I forget who it was, but various people would say, I met all of these people, and Robert Anton Wilson was the one that was like the real deal. There wasn't like a man behind the curtain, so to speak. It was just the real humble, sweet grandpa.
Yeah, for sure. So I think he's definitely the closest to the heart out of anyone that I
Oh,
can
right.
imagine.
That's where we're going
Um,
with them. Heart
so
over
yeah, so
head.
so right.
Go ahead.
I would say like Prometheus Rising is probably the closest to just being a like all intellect development of the mind, like it's all I don't know that it's all, I don't want to overstate it, but I think it makes sense that they
Yeah.
can read that book and then have no contradiction with their belief system and what's written there. And I've been thinking about this for several years, and is it more, is it a problem, or is it an opportunity, or is it a little bit of both? And I'm leaning towards opportunity, because I mean, like, and the reason why it's like still so attractive to play around with Raw's ideas is because they don't stay contained to your tribal bubble. When you talk about Robert Anton Wilson, you might actually get to reach out into the circles that you can't really reach normally, and vice versa. So I think you actually get a little bit of a mediated discourse, into a larger world than you would otherwise. And I hope that leads to something positive.
Well, I think for me, his work has really helped me learn how to relate to almost anybody. I mean, if you look at Prometheus Rising, everybody says do the exercises, and 75% of those exercises are like, put yourself in this mindset and then put yourself in the opposite mindset. And it allows me to, through that and just experience in life and relating to these people, being able to put myself in other people's mindsets and oh, okay. But what I see right now is that we're so politically divided that and it's becoming more and more polarized, that it's really hard to be in the middle. If you critique one side, it's always been the case, if you critique one side, the binary thinking leads people to believe that you must obviously believe in the other side, because you're critiquing A, then you must believe B. And that's always driven me nuts. But it seems like even more extreme now. It's where if you well, so-and-so's got a point, then that means you must be aligned with so-and-so, and you're missing out on all this other stuff. And that's real unfortunate, but
Yeah, and I think that's a byproduct, I think, of there's a tactic that people take that is like, um basically arguing in bad faith. And I think at
mm,
a certain point you can't tell who's arguing in good or bad faith, and that it just kind of devolves into everyone shouting slogans at each other. It almost feels like old WWF wrestling, and everyone's just kind of cutting promos and trying to get heat from the crowd or pop from the crowd. And and that's not a criticism. I think I think we're all in the same boat. I think so I think the thing that's to be done is to find some sort of mediated discourse where people can actually say, like, okay, so I'll give you a medium hot button topic, which is student debt cancellation, right? So I am in favor of student debt cancellation because I think that it is a beneficial, um, like, boost to the economy. And like, I know people younger than me that are paying like 1,500 a month in student loans, that then can't buy houses, that then can't have kids, that then can't this. Now, it's very possible that there is a good counter argument to it, which is basically like, no, the student loans are nested together with other investments, and if you cancel them, then that falls. But we don't have that argument. We don't have this is the positive, this is the negative. We just have, that's not fair, or yes, it is fair. And so, like, if there was a way that you could actually have a good faith discussion with, like, cited sources, and like, no, this is why you can't, or no, this is why you should, and like, we have all the technology and like, human resources to do it, but it just doesn't happen, probably because in a lot of, so let's say, for example, if the people that it would negatively affect are only very few people, but they're very influential and powerful, they benefit from not having a clear discussion. So they would probably rather just flood the zone with bullshit. But I think if we could get to a point where, no, what actually is the problem with it, without just saying that it's unfair, I think that maybe you'd make some progress, because it's there could be negative parts to it that I haven't considered, but that's not what's presented to me. What's presented to me is that it's not fair.
Right. Yeah, there's no room for intelligent discussion. It's all very passion and emotions, and coming from the two paradigms, either the right or the left. The right would say that it's the free market, and these people voluntarily took on this debt, and that they need to be held responsible for that. And the left,
right,
have completely different set of arguments about wage gaps and forgiveness and this and that.
Right. So I think, as boring as it is, I think we just need more people involved on like a C-SPAN level of boring detail. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to get boring. It's going to get, it's going to get in the weeds. And I think that that's just going to have to be how it goes if you want to make progress. If we don't want to just have WrestleMania, we're going to actually like have to go back to civics class. Or we can just keep doing WrestleMania. I don't know.
Painful.
Yeah, no, you go to school board meetings, and you just get into trying to actually like wade into things with people. It's not appealing, but it's, I don't know, I think it's maybe the zone that's been abandoned that maybe needs to be re-examined, but in a way that's maybe somehow more productive.
I agree with that. I just don't know how that's gonna happen.
I don't know. I don't either. It probably won't, is the thing. And probably what's going to happen is that we're just going to keep reacting to emergencies. And maybe some of our, if the best we can do is prepare for better responses to the emergencies that are going to keep happening, then maybe, the bone will grow back stronger after it breaks. Or maybe, and I'm sure it's going to be a mixed bag. Some things will improve, some things will get worse, and that's how things have always been. Is a very mixed bag. I don't have any sort of clear, vision for the progression of the future. It feels very. I remember I went to the Amazon in 2004, right before, literally the week before the Maybe Logic classes started, and I did the ayahuasca thing, and I had a big grand, vision of the future, and in around 2015, I realized that it had run out. That's about where the vision saw to. Because you know what I mean? Like all of the insights had been exhausted by that point. And I don't have a new one personally. I'm sure other people do. But for me, it feels very like we're going to be led by events more than ideas for, the foreseeable future.
Interesting. Maybe you need to go back to the jungle.
Yeah, that's possible.
You're 7 years overdue.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
but I the smartphone was really about like what I saw.
is that?
Well, not specifically, but basically like interconnection on a planetary scale,
Oh, nice.
which
Right.
done. It's here. We already did it.
What comes up for me when I listen to the SOG audio and think about a lot of this is I kind of laugh, like it was there's this certain grumpy old grandpa element, pissed off because he can't get legal weed to a certain extent, and also just this post 9/11 us versus the brown people thing. But what strikes me is those were like simpler times, like compared to now.
Yeah, it's true. I've been reading Wilhelm Reich's The Mass Psychology of Fascism for semi-obvious reasons. And what he says is that the only way to fight fascism is with community support. Basically, fascists will never, ever help you. They will only they'll only the promises that a fascist makes is to hurt someone, just not you. They'll never promise to do anything for you except for the hurt the people you don't like. And so if you can create community structures that provide resources, that's the opposite of fascism. Like providing for your people is the opposite of fascism. And there are a lot of opportunities for that in all of our environments. And that I think that that's going to be maybe the way that I want to go. If you can't trust, the big overarching competing powers that be, then mutual aid is, going to be the only game in town. And that in some ways that is the proper anecdote to fascism, is mutual aid and, kind of community support. And it's not, it's not, utopian, but it might be the best that we can do with what we got.
No, I love that.
And that's the thing of changing this, like our hard-wired individualism into something that is, like you say, both. You don't want to give up individualism to the point that you're a drone society, but you also don't want to be individualist so much that you're elevating the self above the environment. So it's this. Again, it's, as always, it's back to the middle path where we find Mr. Wilson grabbing people from both sides and pulling them together.
I like that metaphor of just your role in the village. So you're an individual, but you're an individual in the context of a community.
Right. And you don't let the community, dictate everything about you, but you participate in its betterment in whatever way you can. And I think like the idea is that like no one would fight against something that was providing them with value. And that if you can build something that provides value in a unambiguous way, then you're going to have more people pushing with you than pushing against you. Except for the people that it displaces their power, they're going to push against you, and they do. But I think that it'll be harder with the way that we are able to evaluate events now. And I think that there is cause for optimism, just that there's also going to be disappointments.
Perfect. We should close with that.
That sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Bobby Campbell for taking the time to chat and Richard Rasa for editing up this episode. Our next regular episode will release as planned on February 23rd. Until then, I am your host, Mike Gathers, signing off with love and cheerfulness. Amor et Hilaritas.